In today's video, we will be going over the Marauder or the error pathway, one of my favorite pathways personally. We'll be fully breaking down the sequence system, going over all the known users, and talking about the history of it. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's kick things off with the sequence system. So as Sequence 9 Marauder, they don't get too much of a boost, similar to how other pathways, Sequence 9 isn't a huge boost, but it does sort of set up the future, so it's all about stealing. So they gain a boost in their physical stats, so strength, dexterity, agility, especially things that help them steal. They have now night observation, so sort of night vision in order to help them recognize different objects, and they have sort of an intuition for when someone is holding something valuable, right? So some jewelry or something along those lines. So basically just setting themselves up for increased stealing. And of course their stealing does go up because of this. Anyways, let's move on to Sequence 8. Now let's move on to Sequence 8 Swindler. Now they can create sort of minor illusions to sort of trick their opponents, nothing too mystical or crazy. They also gain the ability of swindling, so they have charm now. They gain the ability of charm. So you feel safe around them, you feel comfortable talking to them, you trust them instantly, right? If you're a non-beyonder. They also have increased hand movements, so in order to steal things better, and they master the art of speech. So now they can talk perfectly and sort of guide their opponents with their words in order to eventually swindle them and steal their things. So very simple, we don't know too much about it, but let's move on to Sequence 7. Now let's move on to Sequence 7 Cryptologist. I do believe that this is the worst Sequence 7 out of all pathways because they only gain the ability to decrypt things. Now what does this mean? This means that they can basically find out any lies or any truths, or with sort of limited knowledge they can figure out the truth. They can also decrypt honorific names of gods, but they can't even sort of look into that because they will get corrupted instantly if they do. So it's not very useful. It sets the sort of the decryption for the future, but usually at Sequence 7 we do see pathways gain a huge boost. So for the Marauder pathway to have such a weak Sequence 7 is kind of disappointing, but it does make up for it in the future. So yeah, basically decrypt anything, secrets, honorific names, mystical items, sort of their effects, negative effects, etc. Anyways, let's move on to Sequence 6. Now, unlike other pathways, Sequence 6 does give them a huge boost. So instead of Sequence 7 usually, and Sequence 6 being weak and Sequence 5 being strong, for some reason the Marauder pathway is very strong as Sequence 6 Prometheus. Now they finally gain an increased ability to their stealing. They can now steal sort of anything physical within a 50-meter range, so already pretty huge. Of course, this isn't sort of mystical items, but more jewelry, etc., right? Normal physical things with no mysticism. They also can sort of start to steal more abstract concepts, so they can steal someone's ability to walk for a very short amount of time, a couple of seconds. Or if someone can fly, they can steal that as well. They also gain the ability of power siphoning, so they can steal someone's ability. Of course, this is very, very limited for now, but if they know the person very well and know their powers, know their pathway, know their exact sequence, etc., they have to know the exact details, they can steal someone's power and use it for themselves. Of course, at Sequence 6, this is very, very limited, and they can only use it for a while, and it is heavily exhausting, but this sets up the future very, very well because, of course, power stealing is a ridiculous concept in of itself, right? If you steal someone's trump card, then that's amazing. And, of course, they can choose exactly which power to steal. But, of course, again, the drawback is they have to know everything about the power. And, yeah, the other person will lose the power for a couple hours or up to a couple of days. So, yeah. Anyways, amazing Sequence 6. Let's move on to Sequence 5. Now, Sequence 5 Dream Stealer is a very underrated sequence in my opinion, because they now gain the ability to enter people's dreams and sort of guide them towards what they want them to think, or even forget. This is what it's all about. They can now steal people's thoughts. So if I'm thinking about attacking you and you're a Dream Stealer, you can directly steal my thought of attacking you. And this could even work at a demigod level. Very, very limited, but under the right circumstances, under sort of long-term dream stealing, etc., this could work. But in the moment of a fight, if I'm fighting someone else similar sequence, I can simply steal their ability to sort of to think that they even thought I'm their enemy. I can steal their ability that they know how their mystical item works, so then they mess up with their mystical item, etc. So basically just the ability to steal thoughts, but still on a pretty low level. But as Sequence 4, they gain a huge boost, so let's move on to that. Now finally, as Sequence 4 Parasite, they gain a multitude of abilities, and everything that we've touched on before improves tenfold. So let's start off with decryption. They can now accurately track anyone or anything instantly. They can figure out almost any secret straight away as well, and Their theft is now massively improved. They can steal life, distance, and position. They can instantly steal 500 meters worth of distance or position. So even if you're 500 meters away from me, I can steal that distance and you will appear right in front of me. Or I can steal your position and simply replace you or teleport to you. They can work around with it. They can also steal multiple things at once. This includes from other Beyonders. Even from other Sequence 4s, I can simply steal up to 3 Beyonder sort of powers instantly. 3 is a lot. Like, from what I've told you, the Marauder pathway only has like 4 up until now. So stealing away 3 Beyonder powers straight away is ridiculously strong, right? And yeah, moving on from this, they can now parasite opponents, and they have 2 different modes of this. One of them is sort of a concealed state. So I enter you, but you don't realize, and it's very slow and takes time, but I can simply hear your thoughts, your deepest secrets, and just figure things about you, but I can't affect you in any way. And the other mode is where I can affect you, right? I directly invade your spirit body, and you will notice, right? You will know that something is wrong instantly, especially if you're a Beyonder. And yeah, it's sort of a battle inside of the person, more like that. And yeah, so anyways, a huge boost at this sequence, and they gain the ability to parasite people. Let's move on to Sequence 3, because things only get crazier from here. Now at Sequence 3, Mentor of Deceit, they gain 2 abilities, or a boost to 2 different abilities. That is Decryption and Deception. Decryption, now they can sort of find any target's weakness simply by looking at them, or making very small sort of adjustments. Basically, on autopilot, their brain automatically finds the target's weaknesses and the appropriate action to take against them, which is absolutely broken. Also, Deception. This is where things start to get a tiny bit crazy. They can deceive the laws of nature itself. So Amon deceived the law that nobody can enter the Forsaken Land of Gods, and entered the Forsaken Land of Gods. Klein deceived the rule that the Pride Mask would affect him, and it didn't affect him. Amon deceived the fact that his lamp didn't need any fuel. Boom, it doesn't need any fuel anymore. They can deceive, even sort of starting to get to those abstract concepts even. And of course, this applies to people too. They can deceive people to a much higher level. Their words hold a lot of persuasion. So even if I know your words are just blabber, right, I will still believe it, right? Because, well, you're a master of deceit now. Anyways, let's move on to Sequence 2. Now, Sequence 2, Trojan Horse of Destiny, is arguably the strongest Sequence 2 out of all pathways, because they gain the ability to create avatars alongside all of their other abilities being strengthened and a multitude of new ones. But their biggest one is avatars. They can now create avatars with their own Beyonder characteristics who operate in different areas of the world. So even if the main body is completely on the other side of the world, let's say Forsaken Land of Gods, their avatars can still operate in Backland, in the Lone Kingdom, etc., right, all over. And they each have their own Beyonder characteristics, and even the low sequence ones can use high sequence abilities at times. They can also come together, a couple of them or all of them, to boost the main body, or they can create sort of another strong avatar, right? But what the Sequence 2 Marauder shouldn't do is create one of a similar strength, because then there might be conflict between the avatar and the main body. But regardless, obviously at this point, with such a high sequence, no one will make such a mistake, right? Then they gain the ability of Destiny. So they can now sort of see ripples in destiny and fate. So whenever something changes, whenever someone takes measures against them, whenever someone plans against them, etc., they can directly sense it, right? Amon said that if Klein didn't wear the monocle on his right side, but on his left, he would be able to sense that instantly when he did it against Medici, right? And yeah, they also gain the ability of fate siphoning, so they can directly switch mine and yours fates, just like that. Obviously this exhausts them heavily, but they can do it as well. They can also parasite their opponents deeper and turn them into their avatars. So imagine you cannot fight back if you're sequence 5 and above. If, let's say, Amon parasites you directly, first of all, you won't even notice. Second of all, at some point, you will straight away become their avatar, right? This is when we see all the people put the monocle on their eye. It's scary. And on top of that, their theft can now steal people's Beyonder characteristics. They can start to steal minor anchors, and they don't have a need for anchors because their avatars act as their anchors, which I'm going to get to at Sequence 1 and Sequence 0 more into. Basically, they just gain so many new things, I can't even think of everything off the top of my head. They're absolutely broken at this sequence, but things only and only get better from here, or crazier, or worse, depending on your point of view. So let's get into Sequence 1. Now at sequence 1, Worm of Time, they basically gain the ability of time, so time control. They can stop time, speed up time, slow down time to the point of stopping it, and just work around with time itself, right? They can also steal, again, like I mentioned earlier, people's anchors. They can steal their lifespan and give it to themselves, and their avatars can sort of do the same, replicate it at even lower sequences, but of course it will exhaust the avatar. But basically, just any control over time. They can even steal authorities, right? Temporarily steal people's authorities over certain pathways, which is absolutely broken. I can definitely see why even sequence 0 gods were scared of Amon when he was a king of angels. And also they can decrypt anything simply off seeing, let's say, a sign, a mystical sign. Boom, I know who wrote that, when he wrote it, their history. I can then peer deeper into that, know everything about that person, their backstory, who they are, and where they are right now. So insanely broken. Let's move on to sequence 0, Error, which just is mind-blowing. Now at sequence 0, Error, Amon is simply error itself, so he can basically create any error within anything that doesn't have one. So let's give this a real life example. Let's say my phone is working perfectly fine. Amon can basically just look at it and create an error within my phone, and then he can use that loophole to enter my phone. That's the easiest way to sort of explain it. He can also create 2 different avatars at the sequence 1 level. I believe I mentioned this in a video before, but I believe this is arguably the most broken ability in Lord of the Mysteries. Simply having 2 more sequence 1s next to you at all times is ridiculous, because you're fighting not only a sequence 0 error user, but 2 sequence 1 Worm of Time users. Absolutely insane. And remember, the avatars can also use higher sequence abilities. So who says the sequence 1 can't temporarily use sequence 0 abilities? I'm not going to get into that because that's just crazy to think about. But as well as this, he can sort of avoid any attack. He can use an error, use a loophole to turn into a shadow to avoid almost any attack. He can also enter a different world temporarily to avoid an attack as well. And on top of this, he can sort of give an error to anyone's substitute, and for example, parasite the substitute, and then simply apply it to the main body. So I've mentioned this as well in the past video, but in this fight against Klein, he bugged his marionette and parasited his marionette. And then he simply used the error to parasite Klein himself instantly. He didn't even parasite Klein, he parasited his marionette. But because he parasited the marionette, he can abuse a loophole to parasite Klein. So insanely broken, especially the ability to have 2 sequence 1s with you as well. Anyways, let's move on to everyone that we know uses this. Let's move on to the Beyonders we know uses pathway. Let's start off with La Nevus. So La Nevus was a sort of minor antagonist at the start of the story that Klein does hunt down in Volume 2. So nothing too crazy, it was sequence 8. And then we have Hazel, who is sequence 7, who was under the guidance of a sequence 4 Marauder called Flora Jacob. Now Flora Jacob was a very, very sort of weak representation of this pathway, and Amon did not like that. Well, he doesn't really care, he just wanted more Beyonder characteristics. So after Klein and her had a fight, Amon intervened and killed her and took her Beyonder characteristic. And let's move on to the second highest sort of Beyonder that we know purely uses this pathway, which is Pallas Zorast. He was formerly a sequence 1, but after Amon took away his sequence 1 because he's Amon, he is now a sequence 2. He's been demoted. What these pathways excel in is survivability. So just because his sequence 1 characteristic was taken away doesn't mean he is gone. He's simply sequence 2 now. Amon, let's move on to him. Now Amon is the representation of this pathway, and he encompasses everything a Marauder should be perfectly. He is the definition of deception, he's the definition of trickery, he has incredible charm, he has a way with words, and he knows how to get what he wants, and he likes to play games, right, like a Marauder would, right? So yeah, unfortunately he is now demoted to sequence 2 as well. Of course, he survived his battle against Klein, even though he lost, because these pathways, the Door pathway, the Seer pathway, and the Marauder pathway are so good at surviving. So he's still alive, and in Circle of Inevitability, it is revealed that he still is as crazy as ever because he takes over Termi-Boros, a sequence 1, simply because Termi-Boros was temporarily weakened, so he parasited him and took his destiny, stole his destiny at sequence 2. So again, showing off the power of the Marauder pathway, but more importantly, Amon himself, not Klein. Klein does wield the authority of the Error pathway now because he is half a Great Old One, and hopefully in the future we might see him use a bit of it. So let's see how everything goes. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought. There isn't much to say about the history of it, but I believe I have explained everything there is to explain. And yeah, oh, one more thing. We do see Amon temporarily gain back the authority of the error pathway in Circle of Inevitability as well by using the Circle of Inevitability pathway to temporarily gain back his authority. But I explained that in my Boon video, so please go check that out. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought. Let me know what you guys want to see next. And yeah, I'm open to ideas. We're all a community here, so please, please, please let me know what you guys want to see. And of course, I will always try and listen to you and do my best to fulfill your requests. I will continue to work hard for you guys, so please like and subscribe and show some support. Thank you.